Hey team, you're about to experience my interview with Sophie Aubard from yayloh. She's the co-founder and CEO of yayloh, and yayloh is a returns management platform for fashion brands. yayloh is 100% focused on creating the absolute best full cycle returns experience for fashion customers, and they are all about creating massive loyalty and massive customer stickiness. Sophie brings a whole lot of experience to the table about how they came to be, what gaps they're looking to fill, and how brands can create a memorable brand experience even when things don't go right from first delivery. Enjoy. This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. We've got a really exciting conversation lined up for you today with Sophie Aubard, and I'm sure I've butchered that, from yayloh. Welcome, Sophie.
Thank you, Jason, for having me.
So good to have you here today. And before we even get into anything, I'd love to know the story of how you came up with the name yayloh, because to me, it sounds a little bit like YOLO, but not. And I love the term YOLO. So I'd love to know how you came up with the name.
Yeah, that's a good question. Everything we do is about loyalty. And when we were looking for a name for our startup back then, we were iterating a lot on, and I found it so difficult actually to find a good name. And you always have some people like it, some people don't like it. And we also wanted to have something which stand out a little bit. And we work with a problem or industry which can be seen as a bit boring, like returns. It can sound very boring. So we don't want to have another boring name with returns in it, because we felt like there is so much more to do with returns about loyalty and customer experience. So we did some iteration, the word loyal, and we also like the fact of yay. That's where it's come from, creating a yay experience. Finally, it's easy, it's smooth, it's a nice experience to actually return a product. So yeah, we just iterate a little bit with a loyalty name and then include that sort of emotion into it. So that's how it came about. And at least I noticed that at least people remember it sticks. So that's at least one of the good things we found out with that name.
To me, it feels like turning a nay into a yay, right? So it makes it maybe perhaps a little bit more fun, because as you say, returns oftentimes are not seen as sexy. In fact, they're seen as an extremely painful experience for merchants. And before we get into that, I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about how you came to be in this space, why this space in particular. You were an entrepreneur with Antler, you were with Unibail Rodamco as a senior asset manager in the Nordics. You've been an analyst for marketing and strategy and a BA before. There's nothing, if I looked across your history and your past, there's nothing that I can see straight away that would allude to the fact, oh God, I recognize this is a problem. I was a retailer before and I had lots of returns and I decided to go out and fix this issue and scratch an itch. So how the heck did you even get to become to be involved in e-com, specifically in SaaS tech and specifically returns?
Yeah, so I can share a little bit about my personal background, and I must also say that I'm not the only founder of that company. So the idea actually came from my co-founder. But as you said before, I was working at Unibail, and then they bought Westfield. That's probably more a name that your audience might recognize in the US. But so I have a background in retail, so I know quite a lot about how it is to run a brand, and I'm very familiar with the space, even though it was more on the physical retail side. But also actually by working in shopping malls, I could also see the sort of decline of physical retail and the rise of e-com. And I really felt okay, this is a space I want to be in and move basically from the physical retail to the e-com space. And then I don't know what's going to be next in store for me, but I also felt it's good to have both experiences. And because I can also empathize with the brands, I've been working with brands super closely when I was working at Unibail. I knew the philosophy, how they think, the relationship with the customer, the branding, the positioning, all of that was something I was very interested in. And so I was interested by technology, but I had no experience at all when I started the company. So obviously I found, and why I joined Antler was actually to find a co-founder who would have that technology background. And that's where I found Nikhil, who had experience. Yes, he had more than 15 experience building software in different companies and also in data analytics. But his last mission was basically as a consultant at PostNord, which is the Swedish postal service. And there he was in charge of looking at optimizing different data processes. And that's where he found that most merchants were pre-printing return labels when sending out order. And it was like, why the hell would you send a return label when you send a delivery? Like it makes no sense. Not everyone is returning the order. Why do they do that? So he just started to click a question, and then he started to investigate a little bit. And when he came to answer with that sort of like problem statement, I found, yeah, that's quite interesting. It's a space I know. So we started like dig into the problem. And then we also found out that it was a big environmental problem with a lot of clothing ending in landfill, like all these big Amazon pallets, 1/10 of the price because half of it was maybe broken in it. So we felt like the industry, there is so much inefficiency there to be optimized. And the impact for not only the customer experience and the merchant experience, but also the planet would be so huge. That was like a big driver for us to start the company. And of course, he came in with all the tech knowledge. And then SaaS, I love SaaS, but I learned everything from scratch. I must admit that. I think it's a very interesting industry and very interesting product to sell and to market and all of that.
Yeah, you raised some very good points there, and I'd like to unpick a couple of these just a little bit more. It's interesting, Amazon has recently, I don't know how long they've been doing it, but it has become a much bigger thing to buy these mystery boxes from Amazon, right? Because they have so many returns or so many products that effectively get abandoned because they get returned and they don't get dealt with properly by the merchant, or the customer just ultimately wants a refund. And so there is this movement across the industry to deal with this returns problem as opposed to just simply sending things back to landfill, etc. And we also saw that returns rates exploded during COVID because people were shopping from home more than ever before. The amount that they were buying online absolutely exploded. So the TAM, the total addressable market for e-commerce, exploded during COVID. We saw, you guys have been operating for nearly 4 years now. So you guys started operating effectively just before COVID really hit. So I guess your timing couldn't have been really more perfect. But we also see that there are many more returns solutions hitting the market. If you go into the Shopify App Store, there's probably 30 returns management platforms in there, everything from Loop returns to Returnista to there's just so many. And so I think that there has been a recognition by both the retail side of the industry, the marketplace side of the industry, but also the tech side of the industry, that we just simply have to do better around managing returns and trying to find a better way to both reduce returns, but also more efficiently manage returns when they do have to happen. Because it's inevitable that we're not going to stop returns entirely. But what I've found is that there's two different approaches to trying to tackle this returns challenge in the industry. One is through tech. Two is through starting to charge at least a nominal amount for returns. Now, what I noticed, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, pre-COVID, the massive differentiating factor for a lot of brands was, hey, it's free returns forever kind of thing, right? You can bracket buy, especially in fashion. And you guys say specifically on your website that you really target the fashion industry because they're a prime offender, if you want to use that terminology around returns, because buying clothing online is oftentimes one of the most challenging things to get right. And so therefore the industry has cultured this mindset among customers, hey, I've got to bracket buy. I'm going to buy 3 colors and 3 sizes because I don't know what the color is going to look like and I don't know if it's going to fit me. So I'm going to buy all these, and then I'm just going to simply return the ones I don't want. And we've built a rod for our own back, in my opinion, and to a certain degree, because we've taught consumers through free returns, we've taught them, just go ahead and return anything you don't want. And we've created this problem. Now it's up to us to solve it. And is that kind of where your thinking sprang out of?
Yeah, it's very interesting thought process. Of course, like you can actually see the huge difference between the return rates, depending on the markets. So for example, like Germany, which is like the home of Zalando, which is like basically, buy 2 pair of shoes and return the one who doesn't fit. It's like return rate is like 50-60%. So when we see with our Swedish customer or like French customer, when they start to open Germany, they were like, oh my God. And then they're like, but what should we do? Should we implement like return fee? But then it is so standard in Germany to have free return. That's just going to kill your conversion. So it is a headache. Definitely we see more and more brands starting to charge for returns. And I think that more and more brands will actually come to that. And it doesn't have to be like a very dissuasive amount. It can be just like a token amount, like 2-3 euro, just to make the consumer become more aware that yes, it has a cost. I don't think we can like view ourselves more longer than free returns. That does not exist. Someone has to pay. And in any case, the planet is always paying. So I think there is a big move. And I think that also ties back when you say, there is like tons of return solution and all of that. I think that what sort of set us apart in our mission and in our DNA from the very beginning, and also being born in the Nordics, is like our approach to like sustainability and also like vision and mission from day one, which is to help merchants reduce returns. And that can go different ways depending on the value they have and how they want to position the brand. But for example, like I had a chat with a brand who is selling like quite expensive product, like you could say maybe a dress is like 300 USD. And they said, we started to charge for returns and it didn't affect the conversion at all because our customers are not price sensitive. They're not, because they're spending so much money anyhow that they're willing to pay 5 USD for return. It doesn't matter. But for them, as a merchant, it actually affects quite a bit the bottom line, especially when you have volumes. So I think a lot of brands are obsessed, like blind, if I charge for returns, it's going to kill my conversion. Now you have a lot of tools to A/B test, just A/B test, try. And one thing that we always recommend a merchant anyway is like if you have stores, encourage people to go to your stores. It's better for you because you're not going to pay for the shipping, that you can put the return back on shelves directly. You have the personnel in the store which can actually engage a conversation and ask, okay, why did you return that? Can I help you find something which would be better for you? And also engage them with your sustainability goals if you have any. As a brand, I think any brand should now strive for that and engage the customers around it. So help us reduce our carbon emission. Returns have a cost for the environment. That's what we do to the first step to reduce that impact of the industry. And I think that we see more and more brands doing it, especially here in the Nordics, where sustainability is very important. And I think more and more brands will actually take that path, and the customer has to ultimately understand it. But I also think that brands should also play their part in being able to give the right sizing advice, have good pictures. I still see so many brands taking picture where you don't really see the material, you cannot really feel it, and that is very important. And we have seen some really good results with some of the brands we work with when it comes to reducing the return rate for 50%, when you can actually change the product description and sizing guide to guide your customers. Because I think I would just add one more thing. I think like a lot of brands have this bad perception of, but people double size and then they return, and that is so bad behavior. And I'm like, your customers, like most of them, they hate to return. They would love to find the right product from the right time, from the first time. So I think it's also like a very important like change of mindset for the brand to say, okay, most of the customers are not bad customers. They come to your website, they have an intention to buy something, and they would love to get something that they will keep. I can tell you, like most people hate to process return. So if brands like start to switch the mindset like that, and it says, okay, what can I do during the customer journey to make sure that the customer would find the product that they will love and they will keep? And then of course return will happen. And then how do I, as a brand, make sure that I get the right information, a lot of data about why people are returning, so then I can improve my product description, I can improve my products, and I can engage them as well in that conversation. Because we've seen with one of our brands who has a quite good audience and like strong sustainability value, that when they communicate to their customer, help us design better product, then they have so much information about why people are returning that they can use for the production. There are a lot of signs which give me some hope that the industry is changing and maturing, and that will more lean towards a more responsible consumption and a way of handling returns. But it takes change from both hands. I don't think it's like only on the customer side or on the merchant side. I think it's like both should lean towards a more responsible way of buying online and then processing returns.
Yeah, I think you raised some very valid points there. I think the key point from my perspective, apart from the historical free returns for customers, the one thing that the customer will never get back is their time. And so the reality is, you're right, customers don't necessarily want to return or buy something with the intent to return. It's that they've got to weigh up the balance of time, right? They say, look, I could try to spend a whole bunch more time on the buy side before I buy, and trying to maybe email them if they don't provide a good sizing guide, or if they don't provide good fitment AI technology, or if they don't provide good photography. Then do I spend more time up front emailing them, messaging customer service, calling them and saying, is this true to fit? Are these true sizes for maybe America or European sizing? They can either spend a whole lot more time up front trying to make sure they buy the right thing because the merchant hasn't made it easy for them to buy the right thing, Or they're like, then if I buy something that doesn't fit well or doesn't look the way that I thought it was going to look, or that it looked like it looked in the photographs or the videos, then I've got to spend more time to return it. So even if the cost is free, meaning I don't have to pay cash to return it, I've got to spend my time. And there is a hassle associated with that. So most customers do not actually buy with the intent to return because they value their own time and they don't like the hassle of processing a return, even putting a label on a carton and getting it back to wherever it has to be returned to. So I think that we have to attack this from two vectors. One is we've featured some very good AI-driven fitment technology and fitment guide technology providers on our podcast before. And I think I still see 99% of fashion merchants out there, they don't have great fitment guides. They don't have the great fitment technology. They don't use AR technology to see how this is going to look on an individual. I think merchants, while I want to primarily talk about your technology after the fact from a returns perspective, I'd like merchants to also, in tandem with this, start thinking much more about assisting customers to buy right in the first time, because that will also make for happier customers anyway. Not just will it reduce returns, but it's actually going to make the customer happier and more sticky and more loyal to your brand if you make it easier to buy the right thing in the first place.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you on that one. And we had a very interesting chat in our podcast actually with one of our partner, Gorgeous, that you probably know, like someone there we were interviewing, and he was saying like, you don't have to have it, maybe you don't have time to have a chat live on your website all the time, but then you can say a couple of hours per day, like every day from 6 to 8, there is a sizing expert online to answer your questions. Because I actually once exactly had that experience. I wanted to buy a swimmer. I swim like just to swim in the swimming pool, and I didn't know which size to buy, and I hate returns. I just tell them, okay, this is my height, my weight, and the size I usually buy at that brand. Would you recommend me that size or that size? And I could wait a couple of days even for customer service to get back to me. I'm not in a hurry to buy that swimsuit. So I think more and more also customers would tend to do like that and have less impulse buying. And then I think it's like vision or like a word. I think it's more helpful than when you see this try now pay later. I don't know what the trend is in the US with that, but like encouraging people to buy, and just already when they buy, they know that they're going to return things. And I'm like, how's that supposed to be sustainable?
Yeah. And I think it's not sustainable even from a customer retention strategy either, because these brands, although they are almost encouraging returns via their upfront behavior, they don't understand the brand damage that they're actually doing to their own brand by encouraging returns and effectively saying, we're going to put it on you to make sure you buy the right thing, but we're going to make it easy if you don't. Instead, it's no, we should be providing every assistance possible to make sure that you have a great initial buying experience with us so you don't even want to return those goods. Now, we're never going to be able to stop returns no matter how good we get at this. So the reality is that's why technology like yours exists. Now, you guys call yourself and bill yourself as the loyalty first returns platform. And I'd like to explore that a little bit more and explore your UVP, your unique value prop, and what your really standout feature and function or approach is versus the myriad of competing returns management platforms out there. What is your lens on this world of returns that makes you guys so unique from an approach perspective?
Yeah. So I think that the one thing that we really want to work with is, so we use like loyalty and retention. And that I think is, we see it as a sort of like a virtuous circle. If you as a brand, you have a strong, and that's why we focus only on fashion and this type of category, because we see that, okay, one, for sure, like the return rate is higher and they have an interest in reducing returns, but the way they capture data and they use data to reduce returns is actually very different. So in fashion, you have so much more granularity you can get on why a customer is returning a product. So the material, the fit, because if a customer selects like bad fit, what does that say really? But if your customer is engaged with the brand and is loyal to the brand, he or she will want to share more information. So in our return process, the customer can, of course, select one main reason, but historically we had a free text box where the customer could type in comments. And we saw like brands who had a really good audience got so much more information there that then they were using and giving feedback to the production team. So now we also developed like a way for the customer to type in keywords. So it's like a second reason. So basically you could actually say, yeah, the material is itchy, or the sleeves are too short, it's too oversized. And that is really, we see that there is a correlation about like how loyal the customers are and how much data you will get. And that's really like the type of retail and like brand engagement I truly believe will make the difference in the future. That's how you actually engage your customers around your brand and help you make better product for them that they will love from the first time. So that's really, I think, in our vision in the product, like everything you would feel, because we customize the return process, like the return form, to a bigger extent that most of our competitors do. So you would have, as a brand, your own typos, your own color on the button. So the customer will feel very much like interacting with you as a brand. And we want to have it like more conversational. Customer wants to talk to brands like they talk to a friend. And if they feel that from the return experience that they have, they will share more with you. They will feel more engaged. They will understand your value. Okay, that brand actually care about me, even though I'm returning the product. And then how can you use that information to then be more relevant when you can get back to that customer? So we also like exploring that area now with the product. Like we can see, okay, that customer was a first time customer and they did a return. This is the product that they did return and the reason. And then how can you re-engage a conversation with that customer? And how can you do that at scale, of course? Because a customer who come to your website for the first time and return, if they don't come back and buy again in the next 30 days, they're probably going to churn. But you have spent money acquiring that customer and they came to your website to buy something. So they had an intent. So how can you reconvert that customer? And this is really like the area where we do believe returns have way more to offer to merchant than just like being, of course, logistic and like operational problem. And I think one of the challenge of our industry or space that to be a good return management platform, you need to cover the basics. It's like a lot of operations. You need to be able to like generate return labels, to process the refund, to give stock credits, to handle multi-currency, multi-languages. So it's a lot of things to build on, and that's why we really want to be like expert in that topic and do it only for fashion. So we also like the best of breed solution for that segment, and now start to build upon everything that we built last 3 years to build more on like loyalty, retention, and data, which we truly see already can impact brands and the customer experience.
Yeah, there's definitely a few, I think, standout things. Now, just to be transparent, I've never used your platform before, but based on what I know about your platform and what I understand about your platform, some of the things that I think make yours a bit of a standout, you offer directly within the platform refund, store credit, or exchange. I think giving optionality to customers other than just a straight up, hey, send this back, give me my money back. I think giving them optionality as opposed to backing them into one single corner, I think that's important. And then I think that maybe you could talk a little bit about the QR code function that you have in your platform, because for me, that's actually a unique standout point as well. So you can, in your platform, you can automatically generate return shipping labels. So that way you don't have to pre-print them. That feels like the worst possible approach, is to pre-program your customers by pre-printing a return label. That seems just absolutely shocking. But with your QR code technology, that allows people to have the flexibility and ease of processing a return and as and when it's required, but we're not programming them to do it out of the gate.
Yeah, exactly. For sure, like one of the main reasons why brands like come to us is because they just want to stop pre-printing returns. And I had an interesting conversation with a prospect a couple of weeks ago, and she was like, yeah, I want to stop pre-printing because we talk about the unboxing experience, but like the first thing the customer would see when they open the package is that return label. And what do they think is, oh, okay, am I supposed to send that back?
Yeah.
So then, of course, there is a challenge with printing, and that we also felt mostly during COVID when people would not go to the office and wouldn't have access to a printer. So that, unfortunately, is not something that we can offer with all the carriers. It depends on what the carrier offer. But in Sweden, they are actually quite advanced with technology and many things. So that in that case, we're quite lucky here. We can generate QR code with the local postal office. So then the customer just get the QR code and they can walk to their drop-off point, and then they would print for them. And that also something that we're exploring with, like home pickup and boxes at the Amazon locker. We have the type of equivalent. Then the customer can just drop the parcel. They don't have to print. And then the person who will basically pick it up to return it will print for them. Because we also feel like that hassle of printing and sticking in the box go away. Some of our customer ask their customer to print, and it has never been like a big issue, but of course it creates a little bit of friction. So I would still say it's better to ask your customer to print than to pre-print. That is what I think is best. But of course, if you have the possibility to avoid them pre-printing by giving them QR codes or drop-off points where they would print for them, then that's of course even better.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about where is my return. So we have this thing in the outbound shipping known as Wismo. Where's my order? We experience the reverse with reverse logistics. Where's my return? Because most merchants don't want to give a refund, or they don't want to give the customer money or store credit or anything until they actually have the goods back in their hands, right? And so there's always this concern by consumers, and lots of data bears this out, that they're sending their goods back and they're just going to have a huge amount of trust that when the merchant receives those goods back, they're going to process it quickly, efficiently, that they're going to communicate throughout the entire process in terms of both it being collected by the courier, shipped by the courier, where is it? It's basically reverse parcel tracking is what it is. And then also making sure that we give timely updates back to the customer about what we're doing with it once we receive it back. And oftentimes this is a black hole of communication for customers. They don't get the appropriate communication. They don't get the appropriate updates. And so they feel, oh my God, am I ever going to get my money back? Am I ever going to get a replacement product? Am I ever going to get this dealt with? And in the meantime, I'm out the cash and I'm out the product. It definitely can lead to a lot of friction throughout that entire process and a lot of brand damage as a result. Yes. And what I like about your platform is that you focus just as much on the return experience, meaning from the point where the customer either sends it off or communicates with the merchant, all the way to the point where the customer has the outcome that they're ideally looking for. And you have integrated with key platforms like Klaviyo, and you obviously have your own technology if they're not running Klaviyo or they want to use your technology for communications, SMS, email, etc. You have focused very heavily on what it feels like to the customer as they're waiting for this painful issue to actually be dealt with by the merchant.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point that you're raising now. Is like also the time to refund. So of course, like what we think that the customer needs to be reassured. Like the worst thing for the customer is to like be stressed about it and not feel like they can trust the brand. Like trust is such a fundamental value that the brand needs to care about and maintain with the end customer. So when we actually generate the shipping label on behalf of the brand, then we can actually store the shipping tracking number. And that allows us to inform both the customer about the status, but also give that information to customer service. Because one thing that I experience as a customer is that when you get the pre-printed label in the box, sometimes customer service doesn't even have the tracking number. So once I actually had that exact experience you're describing, I sent back a return. And when I reached out to customer service, okay, where did I return? She was like, oh, did you keep the tracking number? And I was like, was I supposed to do that really? No, I don't have the tracking number. They're using one of our computer. I'm not going to name them anyhow. So then I actually reached out, okay, I think we should work together. But I think it's also like a problem if customer service and is swamped with these requests that they cannot actually answer. So by not automating the shipping label generation, it is better for information for your customers and also for your customer service team. And then for the customer, of course, you can keep them engaged and informed. So what we have is a tracking page. So they can basically log in from their account or directly in the link in the email. And then they can basically see, okay, what the status of the parcel. And then if they subscribe to SMS notification, then we'll send them an SMS when the parcel is received at the warehouse. But I think one of the very interesting things that you pointed out is like the time to refund. Because we are telling our merchants like, okay, why should you actually wait for the customer, for the warehouse to inspect the product to send the refund, and how can you mitigate that risk? And we look at the numbers and okay, how many returns are rejected at the warehouse and how many refunds do you actually reject, and how do you handle the time you spend on first getting that information from the warehouse, customer service doing the refund, handling all the requests, saying okay, where is my return? Instead, why don't you send refunds earlier in the process? Because you have the tracking, so you know the parcel is in transit. And with our platform, you can also segment and do that only for your best customers. So the one who obviously like return a lot or are not profitable customer, then you keep that for later. But the one who are your good customers, then as soon as the parcel is in transit, you just send the refund. Which is what Amazon, and I know has been doing. I don't know if they still do it yet. And of course, you might have some people abusing, but I think it also very much depends of your brand and your customer type. So if you're like a very mass market brand sending like a lot of volumes and you have a lot of problems with people abusing your return policy, that's probably not what I would recommend. But if you're like more like direct to consumer brands with a quite engaged audience, like quite pricey products, then to me it's a no-brainer. You should not like hold your customer money for that long and give them a return experience which probably will make them not come back to your store. So there is more value getting into like giving 98% of your customer a great return experience instead of focusing on the 2% which are actually abusing and punishing everyone for this 2%. But it's also like education, because merchants like start to be there, but it also takes time for them to take that leap and accept that yes, okay, 2% will probably abuse and will get the refund anyhow. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you talk really eloquently about the Pareto principle, right? It's the 80-20 rule. At the end of the day, we should be catering for the vast majority of our customers and then deal with the outliers as exceptions. Now that leads very nicely and segues very nicely into the discussion around returns analytics. And most merchants don't really have great returns analytics today. Maybe if they're running Gorgeous, and maybe if they process returns or process the RMA process through Gorgeous, and therefore they can tag their tickets as returns and they can dig into that a little bit deeper. Maybe they have some element of returns analytics, but many brands don't have returns analytics at all. And what this really, I think, is like fighting with one arm tied behind your back, because both in terms of new product development, in terms of segmenting down even to the variant level, maybe there's only one variant of a product that has an issue, but the rest of the variants are completely fine. Not understanding which customers, for example, are high returners versus low returners, which customers are high profit versus low profit in terms of the whole spectrum of cost to service them. So I think that some merchants really drill down from a data perspective very well, but the vast majority, in my experience, actually do not, because they don't have any systematized process to capture this data in a meaningful way, slice and dice it and segment it in a meaningful way, and then treat each customer differently or uniquely based on that customer specific data. So maybe you can speak a little bit more about the kind of additional data that you guys bring to brands that give them insights both into their catalog and its performance, and maybe areas that they need to address, or in NPD that they need to address, combined with how they can better tailor the experience to the specific customer that they're dealing with. And then finally, I know there's a lot of questions. Finally, do you see that oftentimes most merchants are implementing a technology like yours at the same time they're introducing a fee for returns to try to tackle it from all angles?
Yeah, so data about returns is like a super interesting and clearly underrated space, I think. And we see that, just by getting your data in a like quite, you say like micro level, okay, what we see with our customers, like you implement the platform and after a couple of months, you already get like your return reasons at portfolio level. In fashion, like the average brand, it would be like 20% too small, 20% too big, 20% fit. And then you have like other reasons. After a couple of months, we had one brand, they had 40% people returning because of fit issues. So clearly we're like, okay, guys, there is something very specific in your case about the fit. So you need to understand that better and investigate why people are returning because of fit. So yeah, that is one example. You mentioned the variant issue. We had one customer, they had one product heavily returned because of too small of a reason. Then we did like a little bit more, they did a little bit more data digging at SKU level. And they actually found that it was the small sizes which were driving that number up. So it was just like the extra small and small in sizes. There was nothing wrong with the medium and large. So that is another example. Then we had another example of one brand, they had a bodysuit they were selling, which was returned because of too large. And then we were trying to see, okay, why that? And then when looking at the qualitative comments and like what tags people were actually reporting, was the material. The material for a bodysuit was basically not stretchy enough. And that is very important information that they can feed back to the production team. So I would say that, and that's why we find fashion is very interesting as a vertical for us and for a data platform like ours, because you have many different layers. So you can look at the markets. I was mentioning before, like, okay, at Germany, high return rate, how should you tackle that? We had one brand selling in Asia, and they had a lot of, they were selling sneakers, and they had a lot of returns because of too small. And then they actually realized that the sizing, how European sizing was perceived in Asia was quite different. So it was quite tricky for them to implement a solution for that, because they would have to have specific product page for that market. But at least they were aware, so they could do something about it, like also in the communication with the customers, or like a little pop-up on the checkout. If you actually notice that customer is based in that zone, you can give them a specific information. So that is like one thing is like looking at markets, looking at product and SKU, and then looking at more like secondary reason, I would say. Is the material the problem? Is the fit the problem? And what we also help our customers with is, if you just look at a data point per se, it's hard to get a conclusion. So what we always tell and also show in our platform is versus the rest of your product, versus your category. So we will never tell you, okay, that pair of sneakers has like a 25% return rate. Okay, but is that good or is that bad? I don't know. You need to compare with the rest of your catalog. Okay, the rest of your catalog has actually 20%. So that one is deviating. And why is that? Okay, that one has 30% return rate because it's too small. And the rest of your category usually have 20%. That is the only way you can actually find out what's like making that product an outlier. Because sometimes you might have a product that had a high return, the return reason breakdown is quite similar to the rest. So it's not an easy one to tackle. And we also try to make them like looking at the sort of what we call low-hanging fruit. So look at your top 5 products. Why are they returned? And then implement changes. And I was saying before, like when just this is done, like we can see decrease in return rate by 50%. And then of course there is like the customer segment, and that I think is more useful for faster refunds or offering returns for free for this type of customers and charging the other ones. And that can come more as a little bonus. Or your loyal customer, so we're gonna offer you the returns. So yeah, that is, I would say it's more, not much related to the return rate, but more like the customer experience. How do you want to treat we have a segment that's called VIP, and we're going to develop that further. For now, you can refund these VIP customer faster, but of course there is way more to explore. And you were also mentioning something very interesting in the segments, which of your customers are most profitable. So we did also like a data session with one of our customers where we look at, okay, how many orders your customer are placing and how many returns they do and which one are the most profitable. And then we show them that, and they had quite different vision just looking at the purchasing data. But when you include the return data, then you come up with different segments. And then you could see that the most profitable segment was the one with when people have returned twice. Because also one sort of misconception is like your best customer is maybe not the one who never returns. It can actually be the one who returns sometimes because they buy more from you, so they also return more. But then they also get to know better your product. Yeah, I think it's also like a correlation of how often do they buy and do they return less because of sizing. That also show that your sizing is consistent, which is a big challenge in fashion when you work with different suppliers and all of that. So it's not an easy code to crack. Otherwise, I think there would be no returns, but at least see that your return rate per customer is like decreasing if your customer is more loyal. That is something that I would track. And I don't remember what was your last question.
No, that's fine. I asked the last question there was, do you see that most merchants are implementing a return charge at the same time they're getting better at managing their returns using technology like yours?
Yeah, so it's not necessarily correlated. They don't necessarily do it at the same time, but there is usually something we start to think, and they start to think about it. So when I ask them, do you, in the sales process, do you offer free returns? Usually they say, yeah, we've been doing that for a while, but we are actually looking at maybe like reconsidering that. And what do you think? So usually it is, because the reason why they will consider implementing a solution like ours is that they realize that it's costly to offer returns and handle returns, and that is damaging for the customer experience. So it's also hard for them to take a shift and change everything from day one. So we also tell them, take it step by step. First, implement and iterate. So you implement the platform with the process you have, then you learn from your data, you get to understand a little bit better what's going on in your return process. And then you take the step of, implementing potentially a return fee. And you also check how that would affect your conversion. So but it's usually, of course, they revisit the return policy and the strategy and all of that at the same time.
Makes complete sense. Now, as with any technology like yours, integrations they're the lifeblood of our ecosystem, and data silos hurt our ecosystem like nothing else. And you've got some out-of-the-box integrations, but because you guys are capturing both quantitative and some qualitative data in your platform, that all of a sudden becomes more broadly useful across the entire ecosystem of both apps, technology, and data sets for merchants. So not only on the outbound, meaning that your system can integrate with something like Klaviyo or a marketing automation platform, a .digital, whatever platform that the merchant might be using for marketing automation, obviously on outbound in terms of triggers and data sending and messaging sending, etc., those outbound integrations are really crucial in terms of having a holistic place to manage their comms, right? If they're doing that today in a unified system. But inbound data also becomes important. So it feels things like, for example, capturing more related qualitative data through things like UGC platforms and reviews platforms, right? So have you guys thought at all about integrations with platforms like Yotpo or reviews.io or other qualitative UGC platforms so that you then have additional qualitative data instead of just the qualitative data that you guys have and you're generating in your own platform through the returns experience, but pulling that SKU specific qualitative data in and correlating that with your data so that you're providing a more holistic view when you're presenting this data back to the merchant so that they can make a really informed decision about what they're doing. And then from an outbound data perspective, it feels like you guys would be super relevant to things like CDP platforms, Lexer and Segment, and some of the more complex full spectrum customer data platforms. Getting a really accurate picture of cost to serve and customer profitability down to the customer level, that's what CDP platforms are very good at doing. And so it feels like both outbound and inbound integrations would be super important to your platform. So I see you've got relatively limited integrations today, but how do you think about integrations in terms of both improving your platform, but also improving other platform performance?
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting question. And as you said, we know in e-commerce, like integration is very crucial to the product. If I take them one by one, so in terms of reviews, we actually had almost like from the very beginning, like discussion with some customers about like, how can we handle reviews? Because we actually capture reviews only about what people return, but it's very interesting to combine it with actually why people are keeping, what they are keeping. So we haven't come further in that like process of integrating with like platform like Yotpo, because one thing that we always thought about is like, how can we use the data that we collect to directly, for example, like update the product description page. But if we only consider like the data that we get, we are missing out on, okay, if the average return rate is like 20-30%, we're basically missing out on the 70% of customers who actually kept the product. What did they think? So that's like a very interesting point. We haven't cracked it yet, but it's in our mind, I would say, put like this. And I think another type of product that you mentioned is user-generated content, which I think is like super interesting space to watch. And I think that, of course, you probably don't want to show how bad you look in your dress if you buy it, right? But if you actually look great and you share that UGC with a brand and someone else can see how great you look on your dress and can relate to you, because I think there is also something about how do we present clothes online on these models, which no one looks like. And I think being more inclusive, so some brands are being better at being inclusive. And we had a roundtable discussion with customers about, how to reduce returns and all of that. And they were saying like, yes, actually providing more models wearing the clothes, of course it helps, but it's so much more cost, right? So why not instead using your community? And that's why I really believe like community-driven brands, because they have that resource for free. And you can share on your website the UGC that your customer have shared on Instagram or social media, and then use that as a conversion driver. Yeah. Oh yeah, it actually also looks great in reality. So I really think that more brands should step into the UGC game and include that in the product description page to make them also look more authentic. So I'm not so sure it really applies to like any type of brand. Like I think, let's say for luxury brand and all of that, it's probably like taking another time, but maybe they can do it only with super fancy influencers, which still have like different body types. Like we can think about Ashley Graham or these type of people who could be like featured on luxury brand online stores. So I think it's not a very mature space, but I really hope that's going to develop, because I really see an impact potentially for brands, both on conversion and reduction of the return rate, and also this community building that we just talked about. And on the sort of like outbound, like customer data platform that you mentioned, it is also, of course, very interesting discussion. And we've been in discussion with an agency, like a Shopify Plus agency, who's building their own platform for data. And basically they were saying like, yes, we would love to integrate with the return data. So we are having some discussions, and I'm also really excited to see. But I think it's also important to share the common value or objective with the platform that we do integrate with. So we convey the same message to the customer, and that agency is also very much into helping brands be more profitable, more sustainable, and in that sense, I think it's a very good match. So yeah, I mean, there is definitely way more to do there, because most brands like get, as you said, like a little bit of data. Mostly they get it from the OMS. So like in Shopify, you can see how many refunds you've made and things like that, but it's still quite minimal for you to really like take action on on your return rate and your products and improving your assortment and all of that. So yeah, there is definitely like a lot of potential as well on that side.
Love it. Love it. Now, you guys have, I guess you run that very typical SaaS model in terms of having tiers. It's a subscription model, as most SaaS platforms are. You have these tiers that include a specific number of returns at each tier. So basically, the more returns you're managing, the further you move up the tier. But you've got this interesting sort of add-on bundle from your Grow Smarter and your Scale Faster tiers, where you can add on additional modules such as automated refunds and WMS integration as well. And I think that's quite clever, because not everybody necessarily wants automated refunds through their refunds platform or returns platform of choice, in terms of they might need an integration with a loyalty platform and things like that. And we could probably get into a whole lot more discussion around when refunds happen through your platform, for example, and have to be triggered through a payment gateway. Then there's loyalty considerations if they're running a loyalty platform. So let's say they're running Rise, then they need to take back the loyalty on that purchase so that the customer doesn't game the system and return a bunch of stuff, but keep the loyalty points or loyalty dollars. So there's a million different things we could talk about in terms of the complexities of returns over and above the internal cost of managing those returns. There's other technical systems and other customer-facing systems that also have to be managed. But let's set that aside at the moment, because you don't own all those pieces of tech. So therefore, you have to leave a little bit of that to the merchant. But the area where you guys can automate some of those things is on the refund front and the WMS front. And I'm guessing that one of the reasons why you have, for example, WMS or warehouse management system integration is so that you can better understand where in the returns process a specific item is, meaning it might have been receipted by the WMS system, it might be in quarantine, it might be due up for inspection, but the refund can happen. And so there's a whole lot of statuses that live purely in WMS systems. And obviously, if you have access to that, then you can update the customer. Is that the primary motivation behind having these other modules, so to speak, is to give more transparency to the customer through the process?
Actually, the initial reason why we had this VMS integration and automated refunds is because the status in the VMS is usually, in the past at least, was a trigger for the refund. So basically, the return comes at the warehouse, that we have that information that it's been received because we track with the shipping carrier. But then the sort of like next step for the customer service to push the refund or for us to automate it is that the warehouse says, like, yeah, thumbs up. The return is in good condition, you can process a refund. And that's what I was explaining before, that we're trying to move the merchant away from that, because it just takes too long time for the customer to wait. So basically what we would do is, like, we would send an expected return in the VMS. So basically make the process more efficient. When the warehouse operator just scans the return, then they have the return pre-filled, and they just have to basically say okay or not okay. And that information will, like, either trigger the refund or pile up the refund for review for the customer service. And VMS is also, like, we keep talking about integration. You have like many different WMS. You have also like WMS who are very old school with no API. So we try also to make this integration when it makes financially sense for the customer. And we have some who are already like pre-developed, so then it's cheaper for them to use them. But if we have to build an integration with the WMS, then we will always advise the customer, like, okay, how many volumes you have per month? You really need that integration. Be careful when you invest in integration, because it's not always needed. And I think that's also why we want to set it apart, so that basically customers who don't need a VMS integration, they don't pay extra for something that they don't need.
I love the way you're thinking about that, though, in terms of a two-way integration instead of just being a listener to the WMS, that you're actually pushing in, because you know in advance when a customer is going to return something long before they actually ever receive it into the warehouse. So you can actually push this returns information into the WMS so long as it's API enabled to do. And so I love the fact that you're thinking outside the box in that regard, because I would have assumed it was just a listener. So you'd be listening to the WMS and saying, okay, we've received this, here's the status of the return, so that way we can notify the customer. But no, you're being proactive, and you're sending data to the merchant as well, so that they can be prepared in advance for that return before they even receipt it. Exactly. So I think that's really clever. I think that's a really nice little feature there.
Yeah, and I think it is actually one of the value of having a return management platform versus just pre-printing label, is that you have information in advance. Because actually, I was quite shocked when we did run interviews. If you have a prepaid label in the box, you send the box, but actually the merchant doesn't have any information that you actually send something back before it actually gets to the warehouse. So even for customer service, so like of course with the VMS integration, we share the information with the warehouse, but also for customer service, then they can see in the back office of our platform that a customer has returned something as soon as they create the return request. And then they can see, for example, if someone has received the wrong product, it happens. You can also monitor your warehouse, right? Someone orders 37 size of shoe and then they go to 38. And then they write that in the comment box, right? And you as a customer service agent, you want to engage with that person already then. You want to tell them like, oh, I'm so deeply sorry. There's something wrong at the warehouse. Let me just place a new order right away for you with a 38 and it's going to be shipped tomorrow. That's what you would expect. So I think having the information about the return super early is valuable for the warehouse, but also mostly for the customer service.
Totally agree. Sophie, thank you so much for sharing all this information with us today. Now, how would you prefer that people find out more about you and your platform? Would you prefer that they just go to yayloh, and I'm going to spell this out because otherwise I would get it wrong, Y-A-Y like yay, YAYLOH.com is your website. Would you prefer that people just go to your website and find out more? You currently integrate with Shopify from an e-commerce platform perspective and Centra. Or do you have other integrations on your radar? BigCommerce, VTEX, Magento, Salesforce Commerce Cloud. Is there any other e-commerce platforms? Because sometimes integrating, it's great that you have APIs, but that requires more work and cost on the dev side for these businesses. So you've got the single-click app integration with Shopify. Are there other simple drop-in integrations on your radar? And is it best that people go to the website to keep an eye on that?
Yeah, so basically we also have a plugin for WooCommerce, which is also for SMEs. And right now we're working both on Magento and Salesforce. So by the end of 2023, I would say stay tuned. Some news will probably pop up. And I mean, of course, you can visit the website, but if you want to email me, it's just my first name at yayloh.com, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. So I'm happy to answer and get in touch directly if you want to hear more about the product or just interested to have a chat.
Fantastic. So I'll put links to your website and your profile in the show notes, of course, so everybody can get a hold of you. Now, we're fortunately at the time where I get to flip the script and turn the microphone over to you. Let you ask me one question. Any question you like. Can be personal, can be professional. So Sophie Aubard from yayloh, what is your question for me today?
I think what I would ask is, what was your most aha moment, like in all your time in e-commerce, like something that you saw or you noticed, or something which clicked something in your mind and said, aha moment?
That's such a great question. I've never been asked that question before. But what I have mentioned before, I think on previous podcast episodes, is the power of service recovery for brands. Now, what I mean by that is that customers have this absolute expectation that things, when they spend money online, that things are going to go smoothly. That's what they're paying for. They just expect things to go smoothly. They expect to have if the product is showing as in stock, they expect it to be in stock. They expect to get it quickly and cheaply. They just have expectations that it's all going to go without a hitch. Now, when it goes without a hitch, that's great, but it's not that impressive to a customer because they just got what they paid for. And it doesn't really stand out in their mind because, hey, I paid for it, I expected it, and I got what I expected. Great, thanks very much. Sometimes when things go wrong, that is actually an opportunity for brands to make a better and longer lasting and more sticky impression on the customer than if things go seamlessly 100% of the time, every time. And I actually have told this story before, but the way I learned this was when I was much younger, and my first career was in hospitality. And I worked for a very nice restaurant in Southern California. And we had some amazing managers that worked at this restaurant, very popular, very huge restaurant. And he told me one day, Jason, whenever we have a problem, let's say we overcook a steak, or let's say food takes too long to go out, or something else goes wrong, or we spill something on a customer at a table by accident, or let's say we just make a mistake and it doesn't go perfectly for the customer. He goes, give me the opportunity to fix this in such a way that it actually makes us look better than if everything went perfectly. He said, you just come to me. I'm the floor manager. You come, you tell me what the problem has been. But if I don't know, I can't fix it. So you have to tell me. Don't try to hide it from me. Tell me. You're not going to get in trouble, but I have more power and more authority in the business to leave a lasting, amazing impression on this customer than you ever will. So you have to bring me in at the appropriate time before the customer is completely pissed off and we can't recover the issue. We can't fix the issue. So he would go in and he would make it right. He would give, he would not only fix the problem right then and there, but he would usually give them like a free coupon or a free voucher. And whenever I had a problem and he fixed the problem, the customer would leave just over the moon about the experience that they had. And I think brands are so focused on never making a mistake, which is totally impossible anyway. Every brand is going to make a mistake. Every brand is going to have challenges. But the way that we empower our customer service and support teams is the ASOS methodology, there's been a few brands that have done this very well and famously and written white papers on it around the world. But I think brands really are missing a trick when they don't empower their customer service teams to do whatever is necessary to leave a lasting, great impression for the customer. And I just think it's an overlooked opportunity, because the way that you handle challenges will absolutely leave a more lasting impression in the customer's mind than if you do everything perfectly in the first place. And I think brands should embrace failure. I think they should embrace fuck-ups. I think they should embrace mistakes as just a part of the learning process and doing business better. And they should embrace turning that into an awesome brand recall opportunity in their customers' minds if they take that approach. That's my opinion.
Yeah, it's super interesting, because it's like exactly one thing we discussed with customer service experts that I got in my podcast, in the Yayloh podcast. And they shared exactly the same. And they actually shared with me that they tell their customers to proactively do mistakes so that customers remember them. So they actually do it on purpose and then make it like a wow moment, like they call it wow service, so that they actually remember them, because they said exactly the same thing. If you buy something online and everything is so smooth and you don't even remember why you buy that product. And that's also why we try to tell our customers, like, if something is wrong with a return, actually be proactive at customer service and make them fix everything so well, and they will remember, oh, I had a bad situation, but then they made everything look so much better. So that I didn't expect that answer. So I'm very happy that we are on the same boat here. Really cool.
Awesome. Sophie, it has been absolutely my pleasure speaking with you today. I'd love to get you on the pod in another 6, 12, 18 months, see how far Yayloh has come along in terms of your integrations and new features and functions. Is there one top feature, one or two top features that either your customers are asking for or you don't offer today that you go, hey, we really want to offer this feature and it's going to roll out in 6 or 12 months? Is there anything you can share, I guess, in the top one or two features that you really have a massive focus on getting out ASAP?
Yeah, I think that really like the next thing that we will look at is how to make our product more conversational. So basically, instead of having our customers, like our merchants, like going in the platform and having to figure out what they have to do, basically tell them, okay, guys, you have that 5 return requests have been inspect the warehouse, just click here, push the refunds. And same goes with the return data. So instead of having them to go and deep dive in the data, telling them, oh, look here, you have like that one product, he has been trending, like increasing return rate last 7 days. Click here and look why, and then have it like more easy for them to basically take action. So that is like one, and that's of course will take form in different areas. So you will have the more written management, the data, and make everything more like conversational and more actionable from the product. So I think that will give quite a new face actually to the platform. But that's more on the merchant side.
Love it. Thank you so much again, Sophie, for sharing your wisdom, your experience, your knowledge, and sharing all about Yayloh with us. And I look forward to chatting with you again soon. Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.